Thank you so much for being with us. I want to give a brief introduction here to what we are doing. We have had week 40 of basically a 52-week course, which nobody ever gives a 52-week course, because we have 52 codes. That's why we've done it. And I want you to know that we have been laying the field for the awakening of the new species. And this new species, we realize, is everywhere among us, but we haven't named ourselves, we haven't introduced ourselves, and this is a very first effort to do something of fundamental importance, which is to create a new field of evolution for the people who experience in themselves the characteristics of what we're calling Homo amore universalis. And Marc conceived of Homo amore, and I conceived of Homo universalis. And what Marc and I have been doing over the past while is seeing if we can join genius. If Homo amore and Homo universalis, which is also the new species and the new capacities and the new technologies, what happens when they join? So as I introduce Marc again, what I've asked him to do is continue to bring into reality the new mimetic code of the evolutionary worldview that is inherent in the Wheel of Cocreation 2.0. I don't believe that this overview is being given anywhere else. And it's perfectly understanding as to why it should be given to the new species, because we're the ones who are holding it. So I will just say again, to remind you, and some of you may not have been here, that Marc is, and I'm reading from this bio, a visionary thinker, social activist, passionate philosopher, and author of 10 books, including the award-winning Your Unique Self, The Radical Path to Personal Enlightenment, the 2-volume Radical Kabbalah, the whole study of the Old Testament, the recent published Self in Integral Evolutionary Mysticism, 2 Models and Why They Matter, and Tears, Reclaiming Ritual, Integral Religion, and Rosh Hashanah. He holds his doctorate in philosophy from Oxford University and received rabbinic certification from the chief rabbinate in Israel. He has been a guest editor of the whole integral movement with Ken Wilber, who is one of his closest friends and partners in developing a new meme for a new humanity. And Marc is my partner in the development of a worldview that we feel is being given by so many of us, but we don't yet have a whole field in which to self-organize. And we know it's a self-organizing universe, and therefore we have to be part of a self-organizing universe. So with that, I've asked Marc if he would go the whole way with us, this section and also the next one, as he did last time, to give an overview of the mimetic code that is inherent in the Wheel 2.0. So Jim, if you would put the Wheel 2.0 for us, please, on, and I will introduce Marc again, and he's going to take off right where he left off last week. If you didn't hear last week, it's all recorded. So would you put that on, please, Jim? Thank you. Welcome, Marc. Welcome to Awaken the New Species. We are very, very grateful for your time and your willingness to do this for us. So Marc, you get started right from where you left off last week. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. It's great to be here, and thank you everyone for being here. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to review what we did last week. We did so much that if we start reviewing it, right, then it'll be almost impossible to get through what we want to actually put on the table this week, and they're a complete whole together. So let me just say a couple of things, though, by way of kind of meta overview and meta vision. So Barbara and I created together this Wheel of Cocreation 2.0. And we listed on it, right, an entire cacophony of mimetic codes, which none of them, or almost none of them, exist in Wheel 1.0, and some of them that are in Wheel 1.0 have been changed. So it's an entirely new world, and what we've been doing is actually unpacking, right, the structures, the core structures of Wheel 2.0, which is a map of a core meme, which I call the universe a love story. Now, when we talk about the universal love story, we're not talking about ordinary love, and I'm going to do just maybe 4 or 5 minutes of kind of recapitulation. I'm not going to go through the 12 tenets of intimacy that we went through 1 through 12 last week, because I want to really fulfill on our covenant promise to go the next step this week. But for those of you who are new, and for the sake of recapitulation in its symphonic form, let's just kind of touch on where we are. So we're in this meme again, which I call the universe : a love story. Not a universal love story, the universe : a love story. And by a love story, we don't mean an ordinary love story. We mean an outrageous love story. So we understand that reality is evolution. 1. 2, that evolution means that reality is not a fact, it's a story. 3, it's not an ordinary story, it's a love story. 4, it's not an ordinary love story, it's an evolutionary love story, or it's an outrageous love story. Now, for those of you who were with us last week, we're literally creating the new narrative. This is the best new narrative we feel that's available today in the world, right? It's the ultimate expression of what I'm calling Dharma. And by Dharma, I don't mean precisely what the Buddhists meant when they used it, that gorgeous Sanskrit word. But by Dharma, we mean the best integration of the deepest insight of all of the wisdom streams of pre-modernity, meaning till the Renaissance, modernity, let's say from the Renaissance till the 60s of the last century, and post-modernity, right, from somewhere around the mid-60s, till last couple of years. That's pre-modernity, modernity, and post-modernity. So we're actually weaving together, across the board, the best insights of the leading edges of all the wisdom streams in pre-modernity, modernity, and post-modernity, but weaving them together into a larger whole, right? A new vision, a meta-modern, a postmodern vision, right? A new universe story, a new narrative of identity, a new narrative of power, a new narrative of sexuality, a new narrative of relationship. Right? And that is the most potent response that we can do at this moment in time, which we believe will have the greatest effect in the alleviation of suffering, the transformation of pain into joy, right? Because we live at a moment of a virtually indescribable global crisis. We stand between dystopia and utopia, between a kind of punctuated equilibria, monumental leap forward, not just a bunch of changes, but what you might call a phase shift in evolution. We're confronted by 7 or 8 profound structures of existential risk that can actually end life as we know it, which has never been a possibility ever in the history, right, of life on planet Earth as we know it. And at the same time, right, we stand between a potential, a possibility of actually creating heaven on earth. But heaven on earth is not going to be created through nanotech and through biotech per se, or through AI, which itself we'll talk about later today, right, is complex on both sides, right? Heaven on earth will only be created if we can do something like what Da Vinci did with his cohorts, right? In the Renaissance, when they were on the cusp between pre-modernity and modernity, and they realized they couldn't go into every village, right, in the medieval European reality and heal the horrific tragedy. So what did they do? They had to tell a new story. And it was the story of modernity. It was the story of the scientific method. And it was the story of the third-person perspective on reality. And it was the story that birthed human rights. And it was the story that birthed democracy. And it was the story that birthed feminism. And it was the story that birthed, modern science as we know it. It was the story that birthed modern art, right? A new form of aesthetics, a new form of ethics, right? A new form of gnosis. So that new story that Da Vinci and his cohorts told, the story of modernity, actually raised all boats. It actually alleviated suffering in a way that no other force possibly could. And that's shocking. That's a big deal, okay? So we are at the same kind of moment. We're at that kind of Bethlehem moment, at that kind of Florence Da Vinci moment, right? We're in this time in which we have to actually articulate a new story. And the articulation of that story is utterly essential. And as I mentioned last week, when my colleague, Yuval Harari, right, who wrote the book Homo sapien and Homo deus, was asked in an interview on a podcast by Sam Harris, right, who pointed out the dystopia, right, the Blade Runner, Hunger Games, if I can use a couple of cinematic images, dystopia that Harari was predicting, right? And Harris intuitively said, so we need a new narrative. And Harari said, very honestly, said, I'm the wrong address for that, right? Which I understand. We need a new narrative, right? And that new narrative, right, has to actually emerge from Dharma. And by Dharma, we mean, again, like the best of what I'm going to call the interior sciences and the exterior sciences. Does that make sense, everyone? Right? There are interior sciences and there are exterior sciences. All are subject to validity tests, to experimentation. Right? The exterior sciences use primarily the eye of the senses, empirical knowing, and the eye of the mind. Right? And the interior sciences use those two, but primarily the eye of the heart and the eye of the spirit. But all of those are faculties of perception. And so in the Wheel of Cocreation 2.0, what we've done is we've tried to articulate the map, the road, the path to actually realize, right, to the full conscious awakening of the implicit structures of reality that have been true forever, right, which are the structures of the universe, a love story. But the universe actually waking up to itself and realizing, right, us waking up to our place in that story. Right, the universe, a love story, right? Not an ordinary love story, an evolutionary love story. And then we begin to realize that we're personally implicated in that story. That story actually lives in us. That evolution is not outside of us. That actually that love story lives in us, but not metaphorically, not poetry. Right? In Wheel 2.0 and in this Dharma that we're unfolding, right, which is the leading edge map of possibility, right? But based on the interior and the exterior sciences woven together, right, we actually understand this is the place where prose and poetry meet. It's a place where prose and poetry meet, right? So that's kind of an overview of where we are. I didn't review the tenets themselves. I'll just spend a minute just kind of refreshing a couple of them so we'll be able to start in the middle. But that's the fragrance of where we are. So the tenets of intimacy, which I'm unfolding, let's call them the 25 tenets of intimacy. Right, these 25 tenets of intimacy that Barbara and I are actually going to release as a little mini book on Amazon in about 4 weeks. Right, these 25 tenets of intimacy are actually a roadmap. They're the map of outrageous love. There's an outrageous love map. Outrageous love, not ordinary love, right? Not a strategy of the ego to get security or comfort, but outrageous love, right? Love which is the heart of existence itself. Love which moves the sun and other stars. Right? Love, which is Eros, that drives all of reality. Now, all of this I talked about or alluded to last week. So if you're new and you feel I'm talking elliptically, you're right, I am. So I apologize for that, albeit insincerely, but definitely an apology because I'm trying to kind of fulfill the covenant for this week and at the same time bring any of you who are new kind of into at least the fragrance of our conversation, okay? So I hope that's helpful a little bit. Let me spend that couple of minutes now just on one or two of the tenets of intimacy. And then, oh my God, here we go. Okay? Yay, everybody? We have a drum roll in the space. Let's have a little drum roll. Here we go. That was a lot. That was a lot. Did that help everybody? Let me just check in the chat box. Did that help you you were new, get at least the fragrance of where we are? Any yeses in the chat box? Okay, here we go. Yay, okay. Thanks, Luz. Awesome, yay, Christine. Yes, Christine Glenn. It's good to see you. Helen, yes, yes, yes. Awesome. So here we go, okay? Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good evening, wherever you are in the world. Yay, okay. So in our Tenets of Intimacy, right, we begin with just the knowing, and again, I'm not going to review all 12 of them, but I'm just going to touch on a couple, and we're going to actually pick up at 11 and 12, right, which is where we left off, and then go as far as we can get this week and then into next week, okay? Yo, here we go. Now, yo is an important word. Yo is the opposite of oi. Oi was a Jewish word which got us through the exile, but now we're trying to go post-exile, so we've moved from oi to yo. Yo, and you got yo. Yo is a good word, okay, yo. Okay, here we go. So, yeah. Reality is evolution, number one. That means two, evolution's not, right? Evolution means that reality is a story. It's not a fact, it's a story. Evolution means reality is not a fact, it's a story. Right? Stories have a plot line. 3, 4, the plot line of the story. What's the plot line of the story? And now I'm not going to demonstrate it like I did last week. I'm just going to declare it, right? Because we're doing an overview recapitulation, but we're not re-entering each one of the points because, well, we could just double click on each one of these and kind of go all the way in. I just want to kind of create a little bit of a thread so we can find our way in. Does that make sense, everyone? And
Yes.
Let me check in. Yay, that's awesome. Let me just check in with my friend from last week just to find out, am I talking too fast? Which I got doing okay, everybody? So if you want me to go slower, okay, just say in the chat box a little slower. Perfect, yay. Everybody else? You want like a little bit slower? Is this okay? Are we okay? Just give me like a thumbs up or a
no,
okay.
we love your enthusiasm.
Yo, that's awesome. I want to make
a bit slower, Gene says.
I knew, Gene. I knew you were. I could hear you thinking that, Gene. I could hear you thinking that. Okay, awesome.
Roshana likes fast.
Yay. Okay, awesome. Yay. Okay, perfect. Okay. Now, for those of you who I know, okay, Roshana says, let's go fast. For those of you right, I actually love to chant. Chant is one of my major practices. Just because of time, right? As Barbara will attest to, I would rather chant all day than do anything else in the world. But because of time, I'm not going to chant in between each one, just because we only have this week and next week. So I apologize for that. Maybe we'll do like one chant before we finish. And oh my God, who wants to chant? Oh my God, that's like the best thing to do ever. Right? Chanting is one of my major practices, and it's a stunning, and very, very subtle and nuanced practice, which we'll talk about at a different time. So, reality is evolution. Evolution means reality is not a fact, it's a story, number 2. Number 3, a story has a plot line. Right? Number 4, we know something about the plot line of the story. The story's going somewhere. It's not just going from simplicity to complexity, which is just an exterior, but actually, reality is moving towards, right? 5, reality is the progressive deepening of intimacies, right? That's huge. That's like a huge story. So, right, we begin with the realization that we live in an intimate universe, right, that the infinite desires the intimate, that the infinite's desire, right, the stirring of desire in the infinite is, right, the inception of evolution. Evolution is, by definition, desire. That's what evolution is. Evolution is desire writ large in the source code of reality. That's what evolution is. Evolution is desire writ large in the source code of reality. Right? Evolution is the desire, right, stirring in the unmanifest to manifest. Right? So the transition, right? The transition, the liminal space, right, between the unmanifest and the manifest is desire. Right? So desire, right, actually is driving reality. Evolution is desire. Right? And the desire moves the story. Right? Does everyone get that? So what's the desire for? What do we desire? What does reality desire? Oh, reality desires more intimacy. Okay? Now that's shocking. And again, as last week we demonstrated most of these axioms, right? Every one of these axioms works across the sciences, right? Both the interior sciences, economics, right? Most of all, the physical sciences, biology, right? Physics, particularly quantum physics, system science, chaos theory, complexity theory. So these simplicities that I'm suggesting, right, are, and don't be confused here, these are second simplicities. Does everyone get what I mean by that? So level 1, first simplicity. That's level 1. Level 2, complexity. Level 3, on the other side of complexity, you have second simplicity. So I'm speaking here the language of second simplicity, right? But none of this is declaration. Every one of these axioms is demonstrated across, right, across a very, very broad field of exterior and interior sciences, okay? So evolution is the progressive deepening of intimacies. What drives evolution is desire. Desire for what? For more intimacy, right? That's what drives the entire evolutionary process. A different way of saying it, again, and I'm just about to finish this, and this is all just a kind of recapitulation of the fragrance of where we are. And again, if you're here the first time, let me just say again, I'm not entering, I'm not demonstrating, right? I'm just alluding, or you might say, using a Tibetan Buddhist phrase, I'm pointing out. I'm just pointing out where we've been, okay? Right, so desire, right, reality desires more and more intimacy, right? The process of evolution is the evolution of intimacy, right? That is one of the core storylines, right, of evolution, which is the realization that reality is going somewhere, aka it has telos. That is to say, right, eternity being, right, actually births a becoming, right, and being and becoming are inter-included in each other, which is why the Upanishads talked about action in inaction and inaction in action. What they meant by that was a proto-version in the intuition of the Upanishads of being and becoming, right? Being is the experience of no thing. Being you can access, for example, in the Hindu tradition, what they call nirvikalpa samadhi, or you can access it in the Kabbalistic tradition in the hitbatlut la'ayin, right? The ani, the I becomes ayin, right? Becomes no thingness, right? And that is the suchness, right? The unmanifest, the absolute, right? Which is the shunyata, or the ayin, right? Underneath all reality, that still small voice in which we can rest when we take refuge in the Buddha, if you want to use that image. And yet, inter-included in the very structure of being is, right, becoming, right? And becoming is a different quality. Becoming is not, right, this vast spaciousness. It's actually dynamic. It's throbbing, right? It's dripping, it's pulsing, it's alive, right? It's moving, right? It's pulsing towards, it has telos, it has direction, right? It's not sitting, it's going somewhere, right? Right? It's urgent, it's ecstatic, it's ecstatically urgent, right? The characteristic of becoming is ecstatic urgency, and the story of where it's going is the outrageous love story that we're telling, which is incarnate in the Wheel of Cocreation. And the Wheel of Cocreation 2.0 is telling, it's the outrageous love map, right, which is, right, telling the story of the plot line of evolution itself, which is an ecstatically urgent plot line emergent from being itself. It's the will of being, it's the desire of being, and that plot line is the progressive deepening of intimacies. Wow, okay? So that's just a sense, right? That's just a sense, and we're pointing out. I've said nothing new we didn't say last week, but we're configuring, we're pointing out, we're saying hello. We're just saying hi. Hey, everybody, okay? We're just saying hi. So now, let's pick up now. I'm going to pick up now. I'm going to slow down. Let's pick up at, 11. Okay, we did 11 and 12, but just to kind of transition, let's pick up at 11. So at 11, we introduced, hi, Alana, right? We introduced a new word, okay? Right? And now there's a field of words here. There's what you might call in rhetoric, right, a terministic screen. There's a field of language. And language is important. Language creates reality. Language forms reality. We said last week, abracadabra, right? Avracadabra in Aramaic. I create through the speech act, right? Barbara, the beautiful New Testament that you love so much, right? Logos, the word. In the beginning, there was logos, the word. So we're creating with words here. We're weaving. But our words are not academic, right? They're not intellectual. Right? That's a bad, right? We think that anything that's a distinction or a thought structure is intellectual as opposed to being erotic, sensual, alive, right? Throbbing, right? Words are alive, right? Words are living. Words are living organisms, that capture, that formulate, that hold, that contain, and then burst forth, right, with the poetry of being and becoming itself. So that's what we're doing here. So we're now at 11, and we're going to now take the next step, and we're going to introduce a new word, right, into our field, which is Eros. And then Eros is going to take us back to intimacy. So we defined Eros last week. That was number 11, if anyone remembers, okay? So how did we define Eros? Now, this definition seems simple, but again, it's second simplicity. It took me a decade to formulate these two sentences, right? And we want to formulate these two sentences, right, in a way that they actually apply across, right, across the board, right, across all the disciplines. That's a big deal, right? We don't want to be stuck in the deformation professionnel. If I was French, I would say that better, of being, only in one discipline, right, and not seeing all the others, which is precisely non-intimate and non-erotic. We want to actually formulate something which is emergent from all the disciplines, right? So what is Eros? So Eros is reality. Reality is Eros. God is Eros. That's a big sentence. God is Eros. Right? What is Eros? Eros is the manifest world. Eros is the experience of radical aliveness, seeking or reaching for ever deeper contact and ever greater wholes. W-H-O-L-E-S. That's a big sentence. Eros is the experience of radical aliveness, seeking or reaching for ever greater contact and ever larger wholes. That's Eros. All the way up and all the way down. Right? That's the nature of reality. So when the subatomic particles, right, seek each other, and you can go even before the subatomic particles to quarks or strings or however you tell that story, and then you go into, let's say, subatomic particles, and you've got protons and neutrons and electrons, all which have a unique quality of allurement. They're allured to each other, which is another way of saying they desire each other. Well, what do they desire? Do they desire to have dinner? Right? Well, they do desire to have dinner. They want to have dinner, right? Actually, they're trying to, but they want to have dinner with the right person, okay? Right? And so there's a field of allurement, right? There's a field of desire, right, that actually is inherent in the first nanoseconds of the Big Bang itself, right? And subatomic particles seek each other, and what do they want? What do they want? They want intimacy. They want to be intimate with each other. Right, they're hanging out at this subatomic singles bar, right, at the primordial dawn, right, in the nanoseconds of the Big Bang, and initially they're colliding into each other, but according to our mathematical calculations, it was almost infinitesimal time, and the first stable relationships were formed, and a relationship means an intimacy. Wow, right, all the way up and all the way down, Annie means, right, from Eros moves reality all the way up and all the way down, from the primordial, level of quarks and strings and subatomic level, all the way up, right? All the way up the evolutionary chain. That's what we mean by all the way up and all the way down. Thanks for asking. Okay? Helpful? Good. Okay, so here we go. So this Eros that drives reality all the way up and all the way down is this experience, right? Its quality, its interior qualities, radical aliveness, seeking ever deeper contact, reaching for ever deeper contact, which means contact means intimacy, right? We want to create intimacy. That's what seeking ever deeper contact, intimate contact, and larger wholes. What's a larger whole? A larger whole means that subatomic particles, for example, come together and they form an atom. What's an atom, right? Well, an atom is a larger whole, which has within it subatomic particles, right? Those subatomic particles come together and they form a larger whole. That is the movement of Eros. Eros moves towards, right? Eros moves towards, everyone with me? Eros moves towards, right, deeper intimacies, right, which are larger wholes. And we'll talk about what that means in a second, more deeply. Let's just kind of get that. Eros is the movement of reality, right, all the way up and all the way down. Right? Now, someone asked, does all the way up, right, include God? Well, God's not on top, right? That's an old vision, right? God is the suchness, the inception, right, and the animation of everything, right? So Eros is but, right, God incarnate, right? God is Eros, right? And the Eros is God, right? So we got to really understand that. We've so exiled Eros, right? We talk about the erotic, we think sex. But actually, and there's a lot to say about sexuality, but that's not our topic for tonight, right? Actually, there was, 12 billion plus years of Eros before sex, okay? Right? So Eros is what's driving the entire process, okay? That's where it moves. That's what drives the entire process. And the entire process moves towards ever higher levels of, right, complexity, yes, or interconnectivity, we said last week, but the interior of interconnectivity is intimacy, right? So there's these new intimacies are formed, and those new intimacies form larger wholes. That's the process. That's the movement of Eros that drives all of reality. Reality is driven by Eros, and Eros is a desire for more and more intimacy, which means deeper and deeper contact and larger wholes. That's the structure of reality itself. Now, when you get that that's a structural sentence, that that's not a declaration, okay? That's an axiom of reality. But it's not an axiom because we can't demonstrate it. It's the most demonstrable axiom that we have. Right? That's actually how reality works. But of course, you can miss it because you're locked, right, in the trap of words. So you think about evolution from simplicity to complexity, and you're trapped in the word complexity, and you can't actually find your way out of it. So you've got to actually, in order to get out of prison, you got to change your prism, right? To get out of liberated from prison, you have to change your prism. You change your prism by changing your word. Because when you change your word, right, you go from complexity to, let's say, interconnectivity, and then you go from interconnectivity, whose interior is, to intimacy, you begin to have an entirely different picture of reality, because now you're looking at reality not only from, right, the drab exterior that you've reduced to a rather boring world called complexity. You've actually allowed the interior aliveness of reality to actually come alive, and you've called it intimacy. And of course, intimacy and complexity, right, while not orthogonal to each other, right, are certainly not isomorphic, meaning they don't reduce and collapse into each other, right? They're related, they're inter-included, but they're different dimensions, different qualities of reality, interior and exterior, to say the very least, okay? Has everyone got that? Okay, so that was just, I'm just recapping. We're bringing it, that's 11, okay, that's 11. Now, what is intimacy? 12, okay? So 12, and this is where we left off last week, everybody, right? This is where we left off last week, and let me just do a little time check here. Okay, it's 5:37, okay? So that took us about 30 minutes of recapitulation. Okay, that's not bad. That was just to love everybody who's new, okay? So you feel totally, absolutely loved in this moment. Yay? Okay, so number 12. Okay, I think we need another drum roll here in the house. Do we? We do. Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. So what is intimacy? Now let's slow down. So we finished with this last week. So intimacy is shared identity in the context of otherness. Right, Sherwood? Okay, this is Sherwood from Sherwood's Forest. Okay, right? Back in the days of Robin Hood. So intimacy is shared identity in the context of otherness. Okay? Now, why does Robin Hood go, right, to steal from the rich and give to the poor? Right? Because he feels a shared identity with the poor, right? That's his point, right? And it's the rich are non-intimate, right? They're erotically disconnected. They're alienated, right? And Robin Hood realizes that alienation is a violation of the structure of reality, right? So intimacy means shared identity. So, right, the electron, right, and the proton and the neutron, they create a shared identity. And that shared identity creates what? A new identity card, which is called an atom, right? Now, but it's in the context of otherness. Isn't that beautiful? In other words, the electron doesn't disappear. The proton doesn't disappear, right? Right? The neutron doesn't disappear. So if, let's say, Barbara Marx Hubbard and Marc Gafni say, wow, let's be evolutionary partners and join genius, right? And actually put our work together. Well, we're interested not in fusion, right, but in intimacy. And intimacy means shared identity in the context of otherness. So Mark doesn't disappear. He actually gets deeper. He gets more vibrant, right? More resonant. Barbara doesn't disappear. She gets deeper, more resonant, more vibrant, because we've created, right, shared identity in the context of otherness. Does everyone get that? Now, it's a very big idea. That sentence took me also, I'm slow. It took me a few years, right, to get to this notion, right, of shared identity in the context of otherness. And my friend Fried Schmitter, right, you're beginning to get a sense of it, right? This has enormous implications for everything, right? There's enormous implications for everything. Has implications for organizational theory, has implications for obviously political theory. It has implications for relationship, right? For family, right? But it begins, and this is our point, at the structural level of reality. As reality is moving towards more and more intimacy, and intimacy itself is, right, you with me? Intimacy itself is, what is it? Shared identity in the context of otherness. So just give you an example, just so we can play this for a second, okay? So my friends, is a cult intimate? No, right? Because a cult, C-U-L-T, right, actually moves for a kind of fusion in which the identity of the individuals is somehow absorbed in the identity of the group, right? Does everyone get that? So a cult is not intimate. That's the problem. Although people often are drawn to a cult because they're searching for intimacy, because they're living in a desiccated, dissociated world where everybody is, as one author reminded us about a decade ago, everyone is bowling alone, right? But actually you get to a cult and actually there's no intimacy. Does everyone get that? There's no intimacy because there's no otherness. At the same time, stay with me, at the same time, you know, when I was living at Lincoln Towers in Manhattan on, where was it, 66 and Broadway, those big Lincoln Towers, and I remember getting to New York and I'm 13 years old and I'm about to start high school and I go into Lincoln Towers and I'm living there for quite a while and I'm like, oh my God, I'm on, you know, apartment 2E, staying at, you know, friends, right? Because there was no dormitory at the high school, this little prep school in Riverdale that I was going to in Fieldston, right? And no one knew each other. No one said hello to each other, right? The entire second floor, you had no idea who lived, you know, 15 feet down. I mean, you didn't even say hello, let alone shared identity, right? So for the people, right, living in that structure of American society or Western society, for the most part, shared identity is very limited. At the very best, you have shared identity with your family, right? Because that's shared identity, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Baby Smith and Cousin Smith and Uncle Smith, right? So we have shared identity, right? But even that, right, is breaking down, right? And it's the essential structure of family as holding shared identity by itself is crumbling before our eyes. But that's a very limited sense of shared identity. Does everyone get that? So intimacy, egocentric intimacy means I have shared identity at a very limited level, right? So what a cult speaks to is, right, don't get to friends, slow down, don't go to Unique Self Symphony. Those are, that word, which I created about 7 years ago, means something very, very specific, but I'd slow down. Unique Self Symphony, you're right, is going to be an expression of intimacy, but let's take it step by step, okay? Right, and try not to, and I'm going to be just super gentle here, gentle, okay? Please love me after I say this anyways, because we all want to be loved, but I'm going to say it anyways. Try not to take ideas and translate them into other idea structures. Because what happens is you actually lose the idea, right? So the way to actually kind of expand is hold the idea set, then 2 days later, see how it matches your other ideas, okay? But try and kind of hold the ideas and try and go step by step so you can actually get the relationship. That's the move. That's actually, is that okay? Okay, if you all hate me now, I'm sorry. But I'd say I owed you that kind of pointing out here, okay? So slow down, you move too fast. We gotta make, okay, I can't sing. I know I'm off too, so I'm sorry. Okay, here we go. Yay, thank you, Helen. Okay, I feel better now. Okay, good. Ready? So what are we talking about? So we're talking about a cult offers intimacy as a healing to a Western society in which egocentric intimacy is pretty much the only thing we have. And what is egocentric intimacy? Right, it's intimacy of separate selves. Does everyone get that? Separate selves create intimacy with each other in a very limited way. I'm intimate with my family, meaning I have shared identity with my family. I have shared identity with my family, and perhaps with a few other people who help my survival, and occasionally maybe one great friend, right? Something like that, right? It's a very limited notion of intimacy. That's egocentric intimacy, meaning my shared identity in the context of otherness is limited to my egocentric circle. Now, is that bad? It's not bad at all. Egocentric intimacy, to actually realize that and accomplish that is wonderful. It's limited. So the evolution of intimacy, now stay with this, okay? This is stunning, okay? The evolution of intimacy, right? It's moving somewhere. Reality's moving somewhere. There's a story, there's a telos. That's what we said, right? In our first tenets of intimacy. So when I move from egocentric intimacy to ethnocentric intimacy, oh, what does that mean? Oh, all of a sudden I've got a shared identity in the concept of this larger group, right? Right now, it can't mean just, now stay with me, it doesn't mean just like I went to a soccer game. And I go to a soccer game or a football game and I cheer for my team because I'm actually reaching for ethnocentric intimacy. Sports is a reaching for ethnocentric intimacy. In a world in which we don't actually understand ethnocentric intimacy, and particularly the kind of population that shows up at the Awaken New Species course, at our accelerator course, right? It's not the most patriotic population. When you say patriotism, let's be patriotic, we think, oh my God, xenophobic, patriotic, really? That's not us, right? So we don't actually understand patriotism that well. Right? But patriotism is actually about, everyone with me? Patriotism is actually about ethnocentric intimacy. My colleague from a very, very long time ago, Yoram Chazony, Hazony, just wrote a very important book on the virtues of nationalism versus globalism. When we think nationalism, we think the shadow of nationalism. Does everyone get that? We think the shadow of nationalism. Chazony wrote just a great book about why, right, reclaiming healthy nationalism is the key to the survival of planet Earth. We make an assumption globalism must be better. Not necessarily. Right? That's a naive assumption, right? Whether Chazony is right or not is besides the point, but the point is that there's something called ethnocentric intimacy, and in its healthy form, it's not fascist. Its healthy form, it's beautiful. In its healthy form, it's John McCain, right? Does everyone get that? John McCain, right, with his sons, his 3 sons decked out, right, in their armed service uniforms, John McCain is in many ways a healthy form of ethnocentric intimacy. Right? A rabid and tragic form is Donald Trump, right? His Make America Great Again is actually the shadow of ethnocentric intimacy. Does everyone get the difference? Everyone get the distinction? That's an important distinction, which is really important. So when we go to a sports event, we root for my team. Yay, my team, let's go, my team, my team. Why is it your team? What does that team have to do with you? Did you practice with them? Are you invested in them? Are you playing the game? But the answer is I'm looking for an identity. That's why I'm really upset when my team loses, right? Because I've got this shared identity with the team. That's a fragrance of ethnocentric intimacy. Then I want to move beyond ethnocentric intimacy, and I want to claim, right? So ethnocentric intimacy means I've got a felt sense of identity, right? With what? With who? Right? With my ethnocentric group, my country, my people. Now I want to actually participate in what I call the evolution of love, right? Right? Tribalism, right? Tribalism, John, in its shadow form could be Trumpian, right? Make America Great Again, right? But in its light form, as it were, it could be John McCain on his best day, right? So the word tribalism can be used in any number of contexts. It can be used as a pejorative in its shadow form, or it can be used in its positive form. Great question. Now, stay with me. So when we move from ethnocentric to world-centric intimacy, right, that means I have a shared identity with every human being on the planet. Wow. Does everyone get that? I mean, I'm comfortable living at any place, right? And I may like my local foods, right? But ultimately, I've got world-centric intimacy. Now, stay with me. You can't actually develop healthy world-centric intimacy without good ethnocentric intimacy, Alana, right? See, the nature of development is, the nature of evolution's process of the progressive deepening of intimacies is that it transcends and includes. So I've got egocentric intimacy, and from egocentric intimacy, I've got to have a healthy egocentric intimacy. And from there, I move to ethnocentric intimacy, right? Now, of course, a shadow of ethnocentric intimacy will say, betray your parents, right? Betray your family in order to prove that you're loyal to the state. That's the shadow, right? That's an ethnocentric intimacy, which says transcend and exclude. We've got to destroy egocentric intimacy. Everyone get that? But it's actually deeper, and this is Khazoni's, he doesn't use this language, but he gets the intuition of this idea. I want to explicate it in my terms. To actually have healthy world-centric intimacy, you need actually healthy ethnocentric intimacy. Meaning, you need to know how to be actually loyal, right, and committed to, right, and actually, passionate about your ethnocentric group, whatever that is. Right? It might be your religion, it might be your city, it might be your country. But actually, the structures of ethnocentric intimacy are critical, right? From economic perspectives, from social perspectives, from health perspectives, right, on so many levels, right? So you don't want to actually exclude. Everyone get that? You don't want to exclude ethnocentric intimacy, right? The American ethic of the melting pot, right? The melting pot of America turned out not to be true. Right, the American melting pot we thought was, okay, let's get rid of all the ethno stuff. Let's all be American. What happened is, right, the ethno thing came back. Does everyone get that? Does everyone get that? That's a big deal. Okay, so let's kind of think this through our hearts together. Okay, let's think this is a heart process, right? This is a total heart process. Let's be with this together. Okay, let's be with this together. Okay, stay with this. And Jeannie, if we had 10 weeks, I'd be totally with you. But since, right, Barbara said we have X amount of time, and she asked me to prioritize, right, getting as much done as we can. So that's where our decision comes from. But thank you, Jeannie. Big, big thank you, big bow. Okay? So everyone with me? So when I move from ethnocentric to world-centric, I actually have shared identity with every human being on the planet. Does that make sense? I actually have shared identity with every single human being on the planet. Wow. That's unbelievable. It's not about being German. It's not about being Jewish. It's about being a human being, a global citizen. And I'm intimate. I have a sense of shared identity with every human being on the planet. But then I'm going to take the last step to what I want to call cosmocentric intimacy. Right? Now, if you want to know whether you're cosmocentrically intimate, you can ask yourself a simple question. All right, have you eaten a hamburger recently? If you have, or a steak, or a hot dog, you're probably not cosmocentrically intimate. I apologize. Why? Well, because you're eating your neighbors. Okay, and eating your neighbors is not a good, sure sign for cosmocentric intimacy. Just sharing that. Okay, right? So, right, cosmocentric intimacy means that actually I have a sense of shared identity, right, with the whole planet, right, with every animal, right? Does everyone get that? With every animal, right, with the whole thing, right? And then I get even wider, right? I actually have a sense of shared identity with actually the animate and the inanimate, right? So that's cosmocentric intimacy. And if you are eating meat, at least you're eating free-range meat, right? Right? Just take a look at the movie Samsara, which has an incredibly painful, right, description of, all right, how we generate, for example, lamb chop, right? Or how we generate, veal delicacies. We basically take the animals, we put them in little, tragic, animal concentration camps where they literally can't move, right? Until we fatten them because they're not moving, right? They live in desperate pain, right? So we can have our little moment of eating the delicacy, but we're completely cut off. We're non-intimate, right? Everyone get that? We're non-intimate with the entire process that brought that succulent piece of lamb chop to our mouth. Right? So that means we're world-centric intimacy, but we're not cosmocentric intimacy. So all of this was number 12. Right? Number 12, which is intimacy means shared identity. Does everyone get that? Intimacy is shared identity in the context of otherness. I don't disappear. I have shared identity in the context of otherness, and that starts with quarks, right? And then it goes to subatomic particles, and then it goes to atoms that form molecules, complex molecules that form cells, right? Complex cells that form organisms, right? It's always shared identity in the context of otherness. 13. Okay, let's take a breath for a second. Let's take a breath. 5:54, let's take a breath. Okay, let's take a break. I want to take a break now? Great. It was a great break. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Okay, now, 13. You ready? Here we go. So 13 is, right, this is now the interior quality of our definition of intimacy, right? Shared identity in the context of otherness, okay? Which is as follows. The interior is about feeling. Because everyone get the interior is about feeling. And from the feeling perspective. And feeling doesn't, as someone wrote before, doesn't oppose thought. Feeling is actually, a thought is the expression, right, hopefully that emerges from a very deep feeling. And we talked last week about, prehension. Anyone remember that? Anyone? I'll check the chat box. Anyone remember our conversation about prehension, right? When I say all the way up and all the way down, right, Whitehead, Alfred North Whitehead, the great philosopher of science, talks about, dear friends, prehension all the way down, meaning even at the subatomic level, there's prehension, right? And I don't see this kind of outpouring in the chat box of people remembering prehension. So prehension means proto-touch and proto-feeling. Thank you, Lisa. Yay. Right? Alana. Yay. Right? Right. So Lisa, right, it's not quite desired touch. It's the desire for touch, which I think what you meant. Yay. Oh, no, now I'm so happy now. Prehension. So prehension is the feeling. It's the proto-feeling, desiring, yes, Lisa, as you say, contact, touch. It's this, right? It's this core quality of cosmos that lives even in the subatomic particles, and it's what allures subatomic particles towards each other. Okay? So now, stay with me for a second. So intimacy, therefore, means, right, I can feel you. Does everyone get that? I can feel you. And I can feel you. Right? Right? One quark says to another, I can feel you, which is why, as Howard Bloom likes to point out, right, quarks hang together or they die, right, in the first nanoseconds of reality. So when a human being says to another human being, right, because it's intimacy, remember we said, all the way up and all the way down. So the same intimacy that lives, right, at the subatomic level and at the plant level, right, and at the animal level and at the mammal level and at the hominid walking on the savanna level, right? So and there's the, right, reality is the evolution of intimacy, right? So it's intimacy, right, from the subatomic all the way up to the most advanced human level. And of course, on the celestial level, intimacy is gravity. And we could talk for, and Barbara and I write about it in a new book, but the intimacy between the earth and the moon and the sun, right? We have an entire section on that, how that intimacy works, that gravitational intimacy and what gravitons are and how they work, right? But it's intimacy all over the place, okay? So, but intimacy has a quality of feeling, okay? And this is 13, okay? This is 13. So intimacy is feel me, right? I feel you and you feel me. Sue, yes, it will be, God willing. Okay, we're going to put out a little mini version of this in a few weeks, and then a kind of larger version, God willing, we should be alive and healthy and well, all of us, in the spring or the early winter. Okay, so intimacy means I feel you and you feel me. Does everyone get that? I feel you, you feel me. But that's only the first loop of intimacy, right? What's the second loop? The second loop is I feel you feeling me. You feel me feeling you. Does everyone get that? So one level of intimacy is I feel you. A second level of intimacy is you feel me. Right? Then there's the second loop. Feel me feeling you. Feel you feeling me. So when I can feel you feeling me, that's a whole different level of intimacy. So if I get on the phone with someone I'm very close to and I can't feel their empathy, then I can't feel you feeling me. So it's non-intimate. But when I get on the phone with someone I'm really close to and I feel them feeling me, which is what empathy is, then it creates a whole new level of intimacy. Then I'll go to the last stage, right? So just so you get the depth and beauty of it, the third loop. What's the third loop? Feel me, feeling you, feeling me. Right? Wow. Right? So that's how intimacy works, right? Intimacy is an actual experience of feeling. Now, let's take this to what we called egocentric intimacy, ethnocentric intimacy, world-centric intimacy, and cosmocentric intimacy. So I'm not being casual here, dear friends, with total respect and love. And we just added something critical to our definition. So ego, ethno, world, and cosmocentric intimacy is not only shared identity, it's not just the evolution of ever wider fields of identity. Everyone with me? Yes? Right? But it's the evolution to ever wider depth, right? Right? Wider circles of feeling. Right? So at the egocentric intimacy level, I have a felt sense of care and concern and love for the people in my egocentric circle. It's not just shared identity. Right? At the ethnocentric intimacy level, I have a shared sense of care, love, and concern, right, for all the people, everyone get that? In my ethnocentric world, right? At the world-centric level, it's not just shared identity, now it's a shared sense of felt care and concern. And finally, at the cosmocentric level, I'm actually feeling the cow. I'm feeling the cow's pain, right? In other words, I reach out of my narrow circle of intimacy and I actually expand my circle of intimacy. So I actually feel, right, into larger and wider circles of intimacy. So, right, from 12 to 13, we didn't just add this casual conversation about feeling, right? This notion of feeling actually changes our definition of intimacy. Intimacy is not only shared identity in the context of otherness, right? That's structurally what it means, right, if you will. It's anthropologically what it means, if you will. But the interior of this anthropological definition is, right, is psycho-affective existential, right? It's a psycho-affective existential definition, which is its interiority, which is about these wider circles of feeling, right, beginning with prehension, right, all the way up. Okay? So that's 13. Okay, we're good? We're good, everyone? Just check in with me for a second. We doing good? All the children of the world are our children. Yes, Kimberly. And that's precisely world-centric identity. And then when we expand it, right, we get to, right? Awesome. Anyone else? Anyone else checking in here? Let's just check in here. We got about 4 people checking in out of 87. Hello, lazy people. Help me out. Check in. All the way up, Barbara, means, right? All the way down means, right, from the kind of subatomic level. All the way up means all the way up the evolutionary chain. Does that make sense, Barbara? Right? It means you go from, right, you go from the physiosphere to the biosphere, all the way up the biosphere, you know, to kind of plants, and then, you know, early animals with a neural cord, and then a neural net, then a neocortex. Everyone getting it? Right? So that's what we mean by all the way up. Okay? Okay, cows are cosmocentric. That's a good question. Roshana is asking about cows. Cows, right? World-centric means every human being on the face of the planet, right? Cosmocentric means not just every human being, but beyond the human world. Okay? All right. Fantastic. We're awesome. We are awesome, right? Good morning, Vietnam, everyone. Okay? Right? Good morning, Vietnam. Okay? Right? And Sarah, I totally get conceptual for you. So I totally get it's hard to kind of, you can't find your way in, to try and, right? Sometimes what I do when it gets conceptual is I just kind of unguard my heart all the way, right, until I can kind of feel it all the way. Okay? Okay. So let's relax for a second. Breathe, right? And feel, right? You know, ideas are not concepts. Ideas are feelings, right? I never think intellectually, right? I think, right, through feeling, right? I feel ideas, right? Does everyone get that? Right? Whenever I think about an idea, of course I think about its congruence. Is it congruent with the most levels of reality that I can find? Of course I think about its internal coherence. Are the pieces coherent? But most of all, when I feel into an idea, I feel into it, when I think about an idea, I feel into its elegance. There's congruence, there's coherence, and there's elegance. You feel the idea, right? Okay. Yay. Yeah, beauty, yes, Alon, exactly. Exactly, that's right. Beauty in that sense, right, is right, related to the way I'm using exactly the word elegance. That's exactly right. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So we're now about to go into number 14, and what we're doing is we're unpacking the wheel. Let me just say one thing before we go to 14. So if you take a look at the left side of the wheel, okay? Left side of the wheel, where it says Cosmo-Erotic Humanism. Okay, that's a word that I made up one day, hanging out with Barbara and Zach and KK. And by Cosmo-Erotic Humanism, what I mean is, and I would say the Center for Integral Wisdom and the Foundation for Conscious Evolution, which are now synergizing, working together, we're actually unpacking a new body of thought, which we call Cosmo-Erotic Humanism. And conscious evolution is an expression of Cosmo-Erotic Humanism, right? And so Cosmo-Erotic Humanism means, stay with me, that we live in a cosmo-erotic universe, right? And that's exactly what we've been talking about, meaning reality is driven by Eros, and that Eros awakes in us as human beings. Does everyone get that? So in other words, it's not an Eros which is alienated from human beings, but it's an Eros that awakens in human beings. And when I realize that the force of desire moving in me and the force of allurement, right, moving in me, right, is an expression of the Eros that drives all of reality, that actually we live in a cosmo-erotic universe, that the universe is actually intending me and inviting me to actually wake up. Eros awakens through me, right? Evolution is always conscious, right? It's got an interior intelligence, right? But we're not, right? We're instinctive in it. But actually, right, evolution awakens inside of me. I become conscious evolution, right? Now, the process discloses itself through me, right? So the cosmo-erotic universe, right, awakens in me. And we're describing the new human. And Barbara and I, as Barbara said in the beginning of the conversation, right, Barbara talks so beautifully about Homo universalis. But I talk about Homo amor, Homo amore, right? And that's if you're Italian, right? And so we put this together about 6 months ago on a Friday night, and we're talking about Homo amor universalis. So Homo amor universalis is the cosmo-erotic universe in person. Does everyone get that? Homo amor universalis, the new human, right, and the new humanity, because of course Homo amor universalis is a genus, it's not an individual, right? So the new human, who is a unique expression of Homo amor universalis, is the cosmo-erotic universe in person, which is cosmo-erotic humanism, right? It's a new humanism, but it's not a secular humanism. Does everyone get how big this is? And this is the new map. This is huge. The implications of this are so dramatic and so beautiful and so good, right? And I believe it's the best I spend. I mean, Barbara will attest to this. I'm not passionate about this because it's exciting. I'm passionate about this because it can alleviate suffering. And that's actually what I care about. I mean, honestly, right, my interest in intellectual constructs is zero. Honestly, it's zero, right? Alleviating suffering, it's everything, okay? So the reason this matters is because this is the new story that can alleviate suffering, right? This is different than, right? This is different than, right? It's different than Homo Deus. And Homo Deus, which my friend Yuval Harari wrote, is dystopian. It's about biohacking your way to immortality. Does everyone get that? And what happens to everybody else? It's about an elite biohacking their way to immortality. And what we're saying, no, Yuval, love you madly, brother. But no, right? Actually, Homo amore. We're talking about the democratization of enlightenment, the democratization, right, of greatness. Okay? Right? So this story, this is not an intellectual exercise, really. Who cares about that? Right? This is actually an exercise, right? An expression, an outpouring, right, of outrageous love. Right? We began last week, right? We live in a world of outrageous pain. Right? The only response to outrageous pain is outrageous love. Right? So this is outrageous love personified. This is outrageous love incarnate. Right? This is outrageous love that can actually lift the planet, right, out of this pivotal, right, moment that moves between, right, utopia and dystopia. Right? And the only way we can move towards that utopia is not through new technologies. They won't do it by themselves. New technologies are neutral. Right? We actually have to invest our new technologies with what I call evolutionary love. Right? Evolutionary love, right? Or evolutionary intimacy. That's huge, right? And we need to kind of get that, right? That's what it is. That's cosmocentric outrageous love, right? Yeah, right? Bob Marley said, yeah is the name of God, right? Right? We breathe in. The out breath, yeah is the name of God. Hallelujah, right? So yeah, brother, yeah, man, right? Right? It's deep, it's beautiful, right? Like, wow, right? We are, right? The new human is, Homo amor universalis is the cosmo-erotic universe in person. And then what we're doing is we're in these first 13 structures, we're unpacking, right? We're unpacking, right? The typology, or the typology is the wrong word. We're unpacking the interior quality, right? The structure of the interior quality of the new human and the new humanity, right? As he, she, right, lives in us. We are that, right? Right? Not just I am, right? I am Homo amor universalis. Now, friends, And that's why, although and anyone who knows me, I would be beyond delighted to do this about 1 million times slower and to chant between each piece, and it'll take us a year. Okay, but I'm fulfilling my contract and my promise to beloved Barbara, my evolutionary partner, that we're going to complete by the end of next week at least the core tenets of intimacy. Okay, so anyone who wants chanting and is not getting it, blame. No, that's not true. Okay, I'm just teasing. Okay, are we ready? Are we ready, everybody? So that's Cosmo-Erotic Humanism. Does everyone get that? That's Cosmo-Erotic Humanism. Okay, so now let's go to number 14. Let's go to number 14. All right, awesome. So desire drives intimacy. And I think we all felt in that moment of silence, just right, our yearning for the silence. So again, I want to just really just honor everyone so much. And I'm with you on the yearning for the silence, right? So totally with you. And I totally get it. And I just want to really just honor that and not overrun it and just be with you in that empathy. Okay. So this desire for deeper intimacy is driving all of reality. But that desire is catalyzed, and this is number 14, right? That desire is catalyzed in a very specific way, okay? That desire is catalyzed in a very specific way, which is what? Right? It's catalyzed by crisis, right? And it's when there's a crisis in evolution, then new evolutionary emergence come to the fore. But stay with me, we're going to add something important to that. What kind of crisis? Right? The answer is a crisis of intimacy. All evolutionary crises, right, is a crisis of intimacy. That's always what it is. There's always a crisis of intimacy. So a crisis of intimacy means that reality in its intimacies and as reality exists in this moment is not working, right? Intimacy is breaking down. And so what reality does is it reaches for higher levels of intimacy. Okay? So Barbara says, and has been saying for many years, right? At least 3, right? No, it's more than 3. Okay? Right? Is our crisis is a birth. Or another phrase that Barbara loves to use, right, and uses and deploys so beautifully, right, is crisis is an evolutionary driver. Right? So let's merge memes now. Let's merge memes. Okay? What kind of crisis? A crisis of intimacy. Isn't that beautiful? Right? It's the crisis of intimacy that always drives, right, the next level of intimacy. That's a very big deal. Right? In Hebrew mysticism, we talk about shvirat hakelim. Right? And for Jeannie's friend from Israel, I'm sure you're familiar with this phrase. Right? Shvirat hakelim. Shvira means the shattering. Hakelim of the vessels. And this is just one image. There's many images of this in different places. This is one of the most stunning, right? In Hebrew mysticism, which is where I kind of, it's the milk of my youth, but Hebrew mysticism, and I'm more comfortable in Aramaic texts than any place else in the world. And in Hebrew mysticism, there's this idea of the shattering of the vessels. And there are 10 vessels. But the problem with the vessels are they're not configured in a way, in an intimate way, that allows them to actually be sustainable. Not wild. And so the vessels, right, contain light which is too intense for the vessels to hold, and the vessels shatter. Right? And then it's the job of the mystic, the erotic mystic, the evolutionary mystic, right, to actually liberate the sparks of light in the broken vessels. Like, wow, right? It's a beautiful image. Habermas, like probably the greatest philosopher alive today, right? It just blew his heart open, this image. Like, we live in a world, friends, of broken hearts. and broken lives and broken vessels and broken promises. And sometimes it's promises we broke to ourselves, and it's promises that were broken to us. And our hearts break in 1,000 ways. But in that broken heart, there's a spark of light. And then I liberate the light from the vessel, right? And I return it, right, to source, and I reconfigure, right, a higher level of intimacy. So this brings us to 15, right? That is to say, when there's a crisis of intimacy, right, there's a crisis, evolution generates a new, deeper, higher, wider configuration of intimacy. Does everyone get that? So actually number 15 is that the mechanism of evolutionary breakthrough, which always emerges number 14 from breakdown, is to generate number 15, higher and deeper configurations of intimacy. That's a big idea, right? It's always a new configuration of intimacy that generates, right, the next stage in the evolutionary breakthrough. Now, whether that is, right, single-celled organisms that are being poisoned by oxygen, right? And so over this very long process, the single-celled organisms reconfigure, and instead of dying off, right, they're driven by this desire, right, for life, right? And for greater intimacy, they reconfigure as multicellular organisms, right? Prokaryotes become eukaryotes, right? Single-celled organisms become multi-celled organisms. What does that mean? That's a new configuration of intimacy. And those of you familiar with the evolutionary chain know that it's that new configuration of intimacy that begins to move reality towards, right, plants and animals. That's the big evolutionary leap. Okay, but stay with me for a second. Barbara and I have, and we've been doing a lot of writing the last year and a half, right? So we have another book coming out called The Future of Relationships, which is it's actually complete, and we've got about 2 weeks left of work to do on it. We're trying to complete another project and come back to that, right? So in it, we talk about what we call role mates, soulmates, and wholemates. And in a role mate is intimacy, which is shared identity, right? Mr. and Mrs. Smith, role mate. And the job is survival, survive and thrive. And that goes on for a long time in the world. Then at a certain moment, right, actually in the last 50, 60 years, it existed in different ways over the last couple thousand years, but it becomes the center of gravity in the last 40, 50 years, soulmate. And soulmate's not just about surviving and thriving. That's not enough. We actually want to share each other's wounds and vulnerabilities, right? Right? Role mates don't get divorced because, right, they don't feel like they communicated the depth of their trauma. Never happens, right? Soulmates get divorced precisely because they can't share the depth of their feeling and trauma. You get the difference? Right? Fiddler on the Roof, right? 1963, Broadway, right? Do you love me? What do you mean, do you love me? Right? Says Goldie to Tevye, right? When he asks her, for 25 years, I've washed your clothes, I've darned your clothes. And she goes through a whole list of role mate functions, right? The kind that Barbara was doing so gorgeously in Connecticut, right? Before it all shifted, right? Right? Oh, but then there's a breakthrough, right? No, soulmate. So soulmate's a new configuration of intimacy. Does everyone get that? Just like multicellular organisms are a new configuration of intimacy, soulmate is a new configuration of intimacy. But what happens when you're no longer personally fulfilled by personal fulfillment? And this is the shocker you're not allowed to say out loud. But what about when you're utterly bored looking in your partner's eyes? Like, really? Oh my God, I'm so bored. Do I have to look at your eyes and be vulnerable again? No, you're not allowed to say that. That's like heresy to say. Even to say that out loud is heretical, because we still live in the dogmatic dominance of the soulmate narrative. But actually, there's a new level which Barbara and I call together wholemates, or evolutionary relationships, or evolutionary intimacy, right? And by wholemate, right, we mean that we're not just looking deeply in each other's eyes, we have a shared vision, or we're looking at a shared horizon, okay, right? That's not just shared sexuality, right, which may exist in a soulmate relationship or may not. You could have a soulmate relationship without sexuality, but a wholmate relationship is based on a shared vision. It's a shared eros, or in Barbara's language, a shared supra-sexual connection, right? But that's wholmate. Now just watch though, each one of those is a new configuration of intimacy. Isn't that great? Now, why do we need whole mates? Well, because we have a crisis. What's the crisis? Well, the role mate relationship isn't working, right? Across the Western world, right? The old role mate contract, men are breadwinners, women are nurturers, right? And child rearers, that contract is breaking down. Does everyone get that? You want to take a look at one book that describes it, Hannah Rosin, Rosin, Slate writer, 2011. Right? It's called The End of Men. Nice title, okay? Nice title, The End of Men. Try and write the opposite book and see how far you get. But anyways, let's not comment on that right now. It's called The End of Men, right? And it's about the breakdown, right? How women are actually dominating education today. Many, many more women are going into college and finishing college than men. Wow. Other than very narrow sectors of engineering, women are outstripping men in education and outstripping men in an entire 8 or 9 major fields, right? So the entire middle income world, right, is becoming, right, dominated by, right, the feminine, right? And within X amount of years, the majority of American households, right, will have a primary breadwinner as a woman. Wow. That whole contract breaks down. The whole roommate contract breaks down. Is everyone getting that? That's a big deal. So we try and replace it with the soulmate contract. Well, let's look deeply in each other's eyes, but that doesn't quite hold. Women don't want soulmate without some dimension of roommate. That's what we're finding out, right? Women rarely say, you know what? I'm an executive, but I love the male clerk. He's great. I want to marry him. Doesn't happen that often, right? So we actually need a new, so there's a crisis, right? There's a crisis. Does everyone get this? There's a crisis. So that crisis in intimacy generates a new configuration of intimacy, which we're calling whole mates. So that same move of single-celled to multi-celled organisms that's generated by a crisis of intimacy, this is the last point, we'll finish here, right? That same, right, is actually what generates, right, whole mate, the new structure. So what number 14 is that it's a crisis of intimacy, right, that generates new intimacies. That the move from single-celled to multi-celled, and, right, it's the move from roommate and soulmate to whole mate. Now, I'm going to stop here in about 60 seconds. I just want to share one last thing, which is we've got just one more point, okay, just one more point, which we're not going to make now. We'll make it next week, which is structural. And then in our last conversation next week, we're now going to take all of this and bring it into the world. And we'll see how we're going to get to about 16, these 16 tenets of intimacy. When we go the last 9 or 10 tenets, it's going to be all about, right, all the core structures of thought, sexuality, God, economics, business. It's all going to change based on new structures of intimacy that emerge, right, from these tenets of intimacy. Let's take a breath for 1 second and, let's just do that one beautiful act, which is my favorite, right, for all of us. So everybody ready? So we're just going to chant for 1 second, honoring Jeannie and honoring my love of chant and honoring Sarah and for our integration. Okay. Here's the chant. Everybody ready? Hey, da, hey, 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 ho, oh, oh. Hey, 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 ho, oh, oh. Hey, da, hey, 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 oh, oh, oh. Hey, da, hey, 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 ho, oh, oh. Hey, da, hey, hey, oh, oh, oh. Hey, da, hey, 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 oh. Hey, da, hey, 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 oh. Hey, 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 oh. Hey, da, hey, hey, oh, oh, oh. Hey, da, hey, 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 oh, oh. Hey, da, hey, hey, oh, oh, oh. Hey, da, hey, 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 hey.
Hello.
Hey, hey, hey. Amen.
Amen. Oh my gosh. Mark, thank you. Thank you, everybody. And we have a few minutes left here. And I want to just bring out Homo, amor, universalis as a field in which this new story is coming into form, perhaps for the first time, from the point of view of a new species. And how do I feel about this? Well, I was telling Sherwood today, what happens inside me when I receive this information is, if you could envision the core of that spiral as the impulse of creation itself, what seems to happen is that core of the spiral completely turns on inside of me. And that impulse, which comes from the origin of creation, and we had to go through the single cells, the multi-cells, the animals, the human, the whole Teilhard de Chardin effort to see where it's all going. Well, where it's going inside you and me is new. It has not been here before. Evolution does not go back and repeat, starting over with single cells, multi-cells. So the threshold of radical newness, the reason I've asked Mark to do this, and we know we've had to speed it up and it should be a much longer opportunity, and we'll do that another time. I wanted everybody to hold what I consider to be the framework of the evolutionary story that's emerging internal to us as greater intimacy with one another, with nature, with God, perhaps with other life in the universe, and that we here are right now giving birth to something radically new that really needed to have this new framework to come into itself. Now, is there anybody, Mark has gone to get something, but let's see if there's something that really wants to be said that understands this in a deep way. Is there anybody who would be able to say something? Come on live, just for a minute. Come on live for just a minute. I asked Mark if there's anybody here who would like to come on live and say, what does this mean for a new species that we are rising up into intimacy, creativity, wholeness, oneness on a human scale and eventually a planetary and eventually a universal scale? Anybody wants to say anything? Because I feel ideally we would be having a huge conversation now. Anybody feel up to it? I'm looking at the chat box. You can let Sherwood know. She'll let you come on.
Elena is here.
Who?
Elena is 1211.
Okay. Oh, Elena? Okay, come on. I can, she says. Elena, hello there.
Hi. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
So what I feel is that this story defines, clarifies, crystallizes the nature of this intimacy we have developed within this group and in smaller groups. It doesn't really have name, didn't have name, this kind of relationships which emerge between seeming strangers. And the story Mark presented
Beautiful.
for me gives names or name to this thing that it is already here but didn't have name for me.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Just to remind everybody what I heard from the small groups that have been self-organizing, when they ask themselves, what is your deepest heart's desire and what is your genius to reveal it, people have told me they know each other better than they've ever known each other before. And we didn't even cultivate these groups very deeply. And I have thought, Elena, that may be because we are in the new context of reality. And I believe, Mark, what that you have offered us, as you say, Elena, it would take a while to read this and study this, but it gives you a complete affirmation of exactly what we're experiencing through intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And we have had an explosion of intimacy here, which I've tried to cultivate in the past. Christina says this is the end of separation. Thank you, Elena. Is there anybody else who'd like to come on and say a word that build on what Elena said about the intimacy that we're feeling, Mark, as becoming members of Homo amor universalis? If this is true for others, we've really got something here. Who wants to come on and say what the intimacy feels like? What does it do if you feel increased intimacy with each other in the field of an awakening humanity, driven by a crisis of evolution? Yes? I'm looking for somebody. One more thing. I know there's somebody great to do this. Lynn says, Barbara, I love the whole mates. Yes, whole mates are really good. They really are. They're endlessly exciting and interesting and new. Affirmation is exactly the right description of what I'm feeling. Freed, it stimulates creativity. I'm feeling it, but it's difficult to speak it out. That's okay. It is difficult. A symphony of love. Yes, I become others. Expanded, says Nahid. I have a sense of moving beyond a native seeing a ship on the ocean horizon and not being able to see and understand it, towards joining the dots to create old and new world unity. Ananda Mal says, that's right. That's right. Okay, everybody, this is beautiful. I feel, without placing any labels on this, Luz said, thank you, Marc and Barbara. What a wonderful awakening experience. Very grateful for your wisdom. Thank you. We are becoming aware we are one. And Jean says, thank you, dearest Barbara, Marc, and everyone for your love and gift for tonight. And I'm going to be visiting Jean and John. Starting on Thursday, we're going to be exploring deep into the intergalactic communication system.
Wow.
So we thank you, Marc. We love you. We
So much,
appreciate
Barbara.
you.
And
I'm so glad that you took the time to be with us. I know how busy you are and how many things you've got to accomplish, but thank you very, very much.
Barbara, I'm only busy because you've given me so many projects.
I know. So anyway, we're all together in this, and when we have the awakening of the new species, we will have a story to tell one another that actually is great enough for a kind of intimacy that we will be feeling as members of Homo amor universalis in a universe undoubtedly filled with life. There we have the evolutionary impulse come alive. Thank you, everybody. Marvelous evening. We love you all, and goodbye.